with Accounting Fly out of Pensacola, Florida. Hope everybody on the call is having a wonderful summer day. It is hot and muggy here. We had rain this morning, and it's kind of like walking around in a sauna. So I'm jealous of those of you who are in the cooler climates up north. Thanks for being on the call today. Many of you are familiar with our webinars, and probably most of you are familiar with Andrew Argue, aka the Bean Counter, and we're excited to have Andrew on the call. If you are new to the sessions or haven't heard of Accounting Fly, we're the career center for the accounting profession. Want to be an assistance to you, whether you're a student, a early career, a CFO, wherever you are in your career. There's value that you can get being a member of our community. So it's real simple. You can register, build a profile if you'd like. The profiles can be searched by recruiters who are actively hiring accountants and accounting students. And you can choose to make that profile public or discreet if you're not in the middle of a job search. Of course, we now have between 4,000 and 5,000 jobs on the site that you can search by location and apply to. Some of them are on our site, some of them are on other websites as well around the accounting profession. And I think most importantly is being a member gets you access to content. This is what we care deeply about is your career and your career trajectory. So if you're a college student, we have events like National Meet the Firms Week, where we literally send your resume to hundreds of employers in your state and the states you want to work in. We have webinars every week that are just geared towards your career. We welcome the chance to take your feedback. My email address is jeff@accountingfly.com. If there's a topic you'd like to hear about, we will pull it together. I'll give you a great example. Earlier in the year, we asked a bunch of students on the call what type of career information would you like, and like 30% responded, we want to hear about the IRS. I was like, okay, well, we will bring in the IRS. We brought in Chris, who's the head recruiter from the IRS. A few weeks ago. If you missed that, that's you can look us up on YouTube. We've got the recordings of that, and all webinars go there. So that's a little bit about us. Logistics. You have a Q&A panel through GoToWebinar. I encourage you to use it. We're going to take Q&A at the end of the presentation, and as an added value, we'll ask a couple of questions, time permitting. Okay, but then after that, any questions that don't get answered, Andrew's going to give you a link at the end of the webinar to join us in a chat session afterwards where we can ask questions and answers and get all your questions answered. I'm really excited about that. That's a feature that Andrew's bringing on. So CPA exam, pretty important. You got to pass it. We got the tools to make that happen, especially from Andrew, who is a CPA, started out at PwC. After a career in the Big Four, he turned his focus to helping accountants advance their careers, and has an incredible blog, some of the best content related to careers that you will find on the internet at thebeancounter.com. Andrew's a great partner and a friend to us, and so we love these sessions. We are going to ask a polling question. Your screen's going to pop up in a few moments, a few minutes when you hear the cue from Andrew. Just answer the question. That'll help us guide the content and the conversation. I think that's all the housekeeping items we got to get out of the way. Andrew, excited to have you on here as always. I'm excited that I'm in the driver's seat today and get to be the moderator. I'll be back at the end just to answer some questions, but I can't wait to hear what you have to say, man. And I welcome you, and Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jeff. And everybody go ahead and say thank you, Jeff, in the little chat window where you can ask questions, because it is a lot of work putting these webinars together. You know, we all just kind of show up, myself included, and just sort of make it happen. But behind the scenes, there's all the technology, promotion, setting it all up, you know, getting people to sign up, all that kind of stuff. So thanks, Jeff, for having me on, and everybody can go ahead and thank him. I'm excited to talk about the CPA exam today. You know, and I'm excited to promote failing the CPA exam. You know, I'm a huge proponent of this. It's weird because pretty much everybody does it at some point or other. I myself included failed. I did a webinar on the CPA exam a few weeks ago, and if you attended that, this will be a little bit of the same content, but I've included a lot of additional stuff, so make sure you watch through the whole webinar. Also, as Jeff mentioned at the very end, I've got a link where you can post questions, and you will be entered into a Roger CPA Review giveaway that I'm going to be doing in July. And you'll be some of the first people entered into that. And you'll have a very good chance of winning. And I'll show you how to do that at the end of the webinar. It'll be a full Roger CPA review course. So stick around, and we'll get to that at the end. And I'll also make sure that, if we don't answer some of your questions here, that I'll be able to answer them as part of that. So today we're going to talk about passing the CPA exam in 7 months and failing at least once. And the reason for the headline is because that's exactly what happened to me. I took the CPA exam. From the day I started to the day I passed all 4 sections was about 7 months, and I failed once. Funny thing, I failed audit. And I'm going to get in a little bit more into my story in a second. And being an auditor, it's kind of ironic. But before we do that, I want to do the polling question right out of the gates, Jeff. So if you can go ahead and launch that polling question. This is asking, are you taking the CPA exam currently right now, or are you going to be taking the CPA exam in the next 2 to 3 years? I kind of want to get a gauge for where people are at.
Hey, Andrew. So the poll is now live, and everybody is submitting their answers. We'll leave it open for about 5-10 more seconds. We've got about 70%. And Andrew, I think, and guys on the call, be sure you answer the poll question. Don't submit your answer through the Q&A. Just submit it through the poll pop-up that should have showed on your screen. All right, we're at about 87%. Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to attempt to show you the results. Let's see if it happens. Andrew, you may not be able to see this.
Half and
Can
half,
you see that?
it looks like.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, about half and half, it looks like.
Looks like
okay,
half
cool.
and half.
Well, that's great. Good to know, and we can sort of. Perfect. Yeah, we can sort of shape the rest of the webinar knowing that half of you are currently taking it, half of you will be taking it, and that's great. And today we're not going to be talking about, here's how you apply for the CPA exam or anything like that. This is really going to be the detailed tactics of how you pass, how you fail, how you deal with all of that mentally. So, let me see. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about my story with the CPA exam, give you a little bit of background about where I'm coming from. We're going to talk about some myths related to the exam, some study tips, and that's where we're really going to get into, should you be doing multiple choice or practice exams? What should you do to prepare for exam day? All that type of stuff we're going to be going through in the study tips section. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A, and then we're going to be doing a review course giveaway at the end. So, just to let you know about my story, I, went to university, got an accounting undergrad, and ended up getting a master's. I needed that master's degree to have the requirements for the CPA. In Florida, it was that 150-hour mark, and I needed like 24 or 25 more hours after my undergrad. So I was, just go ahead and do a master's. So I finished my PwC internship, went back for my master's. I was working 40 hours a week, had about 12 hours of master's classes plus homework, and I had a girlfriend. And I was really determined, from the time I did my PwC internship, I knew I'd be starting full-time at PwC about 12, 13 months later, and I was determined to pass the CPA exam. And I'm really glad that I did, because when I started full-time and everybody else was, after busy season, going home to study for FAR, they came in, working Saturdays, a lot more miserable than I was, having been able to go home and relax that evening. So I was on a game plan. I had the date set. I planned on taking all of them in a 6-month period. And to be honest, I even tried to do it quicker than that. You got to be careful when you apply for the exam, because sometimes you put out your application and you don't receive your NTS, your notice to schedule, which basically talks about when you can take the exam. For me, it took 8 or 10 weeks. So I was like ready to go, excited, submitted my application, and then I had to wait around for 2 months. And so you need to build that into your schedule. You need to do a little bit more research about your specific state and how long that takes. And like I said, we're not really going to get into too much about that here, but just know that that can affect your game plan. And just to give you an idea of when I took the sections, this is really when I did it. I started in October, took reg, then November took BEC, January audit, and February FAR. So I was trying to really do this in a quick, totally in the 6-month time period. I even wanted to take FAR in that October, November timeframe, but like I said, I kind of got pushed back because I didn't get my NTS until mid-October. So I had to push things back a little bit. And we had that December blackout month, which everyone is familiar with. And to be honest, it was tough. I mean, I had those 8 to 10 weeks of NTS delays, but I did take all 4 sections within about 4 months. And that gave me about 1 month to study per section. And that's really what I recommend to people. Even if you're working full-time like I was, even if you have a family, even if you're doing master's classes, if you stretch it out over more than a month, like 2 months or 3 months, by the time you're at the end of the content, you're kind of like, what was I even reading at the beginning? That was 3 months ago. you really need to pack it in tight, and that's exactly what I did. And so, I took the exam on those dates, and I thought I was totally done. I remember when I got my score, I was so excited and happy that I had passed my third section, which was FAR, and I actually didn't get my other section, which was audit. And there's a bit of a mix-up here on the screen. When you look at January 25th, 2011, that should actually be audit. And I didn't get that score till last, but I was so confident on audit. I only took an hour to take the entire exam when I had, I think, 4 hours. Like, I was blazing through the whole thing. Like, I thought I knocked it out of the park. And so after I got my third review score passed, I actually went out and celebrated. I went out to the bar, had a couple of drinks with my buddies. I was like, I passed the CPA. I was so confident about audit. And I remember waking up at about 3 o'clock in the morning and checking the NASBA site and seeing that I got, I believe it was a 70. Yep, I got a 70 on audit. And I failed. And that was the third section that I took. But man, they released the scores really funky. And sometimes you can take one exam 2 months ago and one exam 1 month ago, and you'll get the scores out of order. And that's exactly what happened to me. And this was shocking to me. I passed every other section the first time. Audit was the career I was supposed to go into, and boom, I failed. And that's a big part of what I want to get across to you all today, is that you're going to fail. I mean, most people fail at least one section. Most people fail multiple sections, and that's okay. And you just need to build that into your plan. I mean, it's tough because, when we're taking exams in school, like, you might be a student that's really good and you plan to get an A or a B on every single exam. But the CPA exam is different, and I really don't think you should freak out about failing. I think you need to make it part of your plan and plan on it happening. So I decided after this failure that I was going to retake this exam as quickly as possible. I was like, you know what? I know audit. I'm going to be an auditor. I must have just bombed a simulation. And I got my score back so late in the blackout month. Like I said, I took it in January, and I didn't get my score till the end of March, at the very, very end of March. So the first couple days in April, I scheduled the exam and retook it. And I hardly studied. I mean, I only had about 6 days between the time I found out I failed to retake it. And that was about 3 months after I actually took the exam. So I hadn't been studying for months. But I knew that I was so close, 70, and I was just figured I'd give it another shot. And sure enough, I went from 70 to 91, hardly studying 3 months later. And I was completely done. And that's one thing that I always try to tell people is, just because you failed, it doesn't mean you need to restudy for 3, 4, 5 months. You need to, especially if you're close. Like 70 to 75, that's a rounding error in my book. I just needed a different set of multiple choice questions, and I needed some different simulations and another crack at it. And that's exactly what I got. It was a fluke. And do I consider that failing because I'm stupid? Do I consider that failing because I'm not going to be a good auditor? No. I consider that, okay, this is the outlier. I passed 3 out of 3 exams, and the fourth one, I didn't pass. I almost passed, and I just need to take it again, and that's exactly what I did. So you need to be careful. 8 to 10 weeks of that NTS, you need to plan for that. You need to make sure that you're working around the blackout months. I mean, I had all of these things working against me, failed audit, and I still passed within 7 months. My hope is that you get away from this webinar and you feel like you can pass in 4 months or 5 months. And the entire other webinar that I did, which I'm not going to get into here, was talking about the exact timeline that I used, that I would use if I were going into the CPA exam today. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I'm not going to go into full detail. I would plan on trying to pass in 3 to 4 months. And that way, when you fail, then you can take 1 or 2 sections and you can still pass in 6 or 7 months. If you're planning on passing in the 18-month window that's allotted, you've got a bad plan. I've seen a lot of people, and for those of you that are new and aren't aware, you have to pass all 4 sections in an 18-month window, and I've seen people literally lose 2 or 3 sections that they passed, and then life happens. They have a baby, they get fired from their job, they get married, or they get divorced. There's all these life things that can occur that they planned on passing all 4 in 18 months. They passed 2 or 3, life happened, and then all of a sudden a year later, those 2 or 3 exams lapsed and they're back at ground zero. And that is an extremely disheartening feeling. But even if you have life happen for 6 months, if you have a game plan to pass in 4 to 6 months, you'll be able to get these exams passed. Like I said, you could do it better than me in less time, and I'm going to show you how. I'm going to show you what I did that worked, and I had all those hiccups, and I still passed it in 7 months, nowhere near the 18-month mark. Before we get into some of the specific details, I just want to talk a little bit about some of these myths. People say, "Oh, I'm working full time. I can't pass the exam." And look, I hear you. Like, I wouldn't want to do that either. I did that with an accounting job I had during my master's. It wasn't public accounting work, so it was a lot easier. But it's really a myth that you can't take the exam and be working full time. That you can't pass the exam fast with a family, and that you need to study more if you fail. These are kind of some of the biggest myths that are out there, and people use them and hear them and say, oh, that's the reason I'm not passing. That's the reason I'm not passing. And I don't really think these are valid excuses. I do think family comes first before the CPA exam, obviously. But I do think that you can make it work, even if you have a family or working full time. These things are not legitimate barriers to you being able to pass the exam in a short time period. Failing, a lot of people, they don't really like to say this, but a lot of people feel this, that failing reflects poorly on you, that, oh, you're not a good test taker. If you haven't been through the CPA exam process, and once you go through it, people are on Facebook, Twitter, nowadays Snapchat and Vine, all these things, and you see all these people announcing, oh, I passed audit, oh, I passed reg, and you failed, and you feel crushed. And you start to really come down on yourself, and you start to think, oh, Rebecca is so much smarter than me, and she's going to pass before me, and oh, Rebecca, I'm sure there's someone on this webinar named Rebecca who's freaking out, like, is he talking to me? How did he know I was on this? No, I'm just using a generic name, but yeah, it doesn't reflect poorly on you. Like I said, I went into auditing. That was the only section I failed. And guess what? I did an amazing job as an auditor at PwC. I got promoted early. I got high bonuses and raises, and I failed audit. So it really has no barrier in my mind to your future success. So if you fail, figure out why, fix the problems, and retake. But don't feel like this is a reflection on your intelligence. Don't use don't plan on 1 year if there's an 18-month window, like I already went into that. A lot of people do that and they get burned losing 2 to 3 sections. Studying with friends does not help. It just doesn't help. Practice exams gauging success. I'll be honest, and I think I talk about this a little bit later. I took practice exams for every single section that I took for the CPA exam. And I'm not joking, like this is not an exaggeration. I never got above a 70% or 70 points on any practice exam. And I almost passed all the exams on my first try. So if you're failing practice exams, good. Keep taking them, keep doing it, keep practicing. It really doesn't have any barometer on your future success. I remember the first exam I went in to take was reg, and I had failed all my practice exams. And I was freaking out because I was like, look, I failed all my practice exams. I'm totally not prepared for this exam. And I came out with an 85, and that's well above the required 75. And I never got above a 70 on any practice exam. The practice exams are there to make you doubt yourself, to make you study more, which is good. That's the way it should be. But don't let that stress you out and then fail the exam because you're stressed out, even though you know everything you need to know. So I love this quote, and I share this all the time. The CPA exam, it's not something that you should really, like I said before, don't judge your self-value and self-worth. It's just like a fraternity. In order to get in, they run you through a series of confusing steps and test you to the breaking point. Those that make it through are now in the club. And that's really the accounting profession. I failed audit. I became a great auditor. It didn't have anything to do with my future success. That doesn't mean that you don't need to know the things that are on the exam. You do. But whether or not you happen to pass-fail on that day with those specific questions, to me, it's not the most relevant predictor of future success. And I think a lot of people understand that working years and years later. When you talk to people now, you talk to partners, I talk to partners all the time, and they're like, yeah, if I had to retake the CPA exam right now, there's absolutely no way I'd pass it. And so, it's just an exam. It's just a test. It's just a hazing exercise to see if you can do it. You want to try to pass as quickly as possible. If you fail, retake ASAP, no more than 2 weeks if possible. Those blackout months sometimes get in the way, but do it quickly. Failing fast is better than failing slowly. So you're like, oh, I feel like I need 3 months to study for a section. It's like, that's great, but what happens if you fail after that 3 months? Screw that, go for it for a month, hit it hard, and then if you fail, at least you quickly failed, you could retake it in a month later, and then boom, it's 2 months, you've already had 2 shots at it instead of 3 months only having 1 shot at it, and then you're looking at month 4 and 5 to retake. So I just like to get on it fast and get it done. And then the last thing that I think really works, like I said, it does not help to study with friends. It can be very distracting. I've seen a lot of people get into that hole and get into that rut. going into a dark hole without friends, family, without proper lighting at times is sometimes the best way to get it done. You need to really isolate yourself and focus on the content. Really start to marry it, get into it. Like, it should be the only thing you're thinking and dreaming about. That's the way you can pass very, very fast. So now we're going to get into some of these study tips, and I'm going to sort of talk about my opinion about how to handle all these things. And we're going to start with multiple choice. I would take, everybody needs to be getting a full review course. If you think you can pass this with free resources that are out there or your textbooks, you're wrong. And it doesn't really matter. Look, a lot of firms will pay for it, and even if they won't, it's really not that expensive relative to how important it is for your career. So you need to invest in a full review course. And when you do that, you need to take every single practice question that's in that review course. The multiple choice right now for how the exam is structured is really where the money's at. There are simulations and there is some writing, I believe, on BEC, but it's a very small portion of what's going on. You can honestly not even study for the simulations, be amazing at the multiple choice questions and pass the exam. I wouldn't recommend that. I do think you need to get familiar with simulations. I'm just saying, when 70% of the points are related to multiple choice, that's where you need to be spending the majority of your time. And I would literally, for each section, even if you don't read all the lectures and do all the videos, which I myself did do, I read through all the books, I listened to all the lectures, I would take every single multiple choice question. And for the areas where you're struggling, like for me, government accounting, it just does not compute in my brain. Like, to me, it just seems like it's erroneous. It just seems like it's built up incorrectly. It seems like it's, there to hide liabilities, which is like the opposite of accounting in my mind. And without getting into government, the point is that I just did not understand it. I could not click in my brain. And so I needed to spend extra time there. And so I did. And I would take all those questions twice or 3 times over, basic accounting or journal entries, or, some of the regulation stuff that I had a really good handle on. I would only do that once, but I made sure I did every single thing. And a lot of people get nervous. They're like, oh, I just feel like I'm memorizing the questions. Well, that's not a bad thing. No joke. Some of the questions are exactly the same. And the reason for that is because the AI CPA puts out questions, and all of the review course companies use those in their courses. And sometimes the AI CPA puts out questions, like for the public for free, and then puts those exact same questions on the exam. I kid you not. And sometimes they're not exactly the same, but they're like very, very close. And so if you're memorizing, that's not even a bad thing. I wouldn't beat yourself up for that. I do think, especially in the hard areas that you're not good at, you need to try and understand why you're getting the wrong answers and what the bigger picture is behind all this. But don't beat yourself up if you feel like, gosh, I'm getting through all these multiple choice questions and I'm just memorizing them. That's better than not getting to all the multiple choice questions. So make sure you do that. And like I said, full review course is essential. The free resources out there are great as supplemental aids, but you need to have a full CPA review course. Practice exams. I already touched on this a little bit, but like I said, I freaked out when I took reg, and there was no need. I mean, I did not get above a 70. I remember being so nervous and just, I had no concept. I thought I totally failed reg the first time I went into it, and I got an 85. They're created to make you feel like you're failing, to make you feel like you're inadequate, so that way you can go back and study the multiple choice. So you need to do the practice exams. I never got above a 70 on any of them for any section, and I only failed one section. So do them. I think the biggest thing that's good about them is that, when you do these practice exams, they make you sort of feel like what it's like to take the exam in terms of the length of time. It really gives you that feeling of sitting in an exam for 2, 3, 4 hours. And the other thing that was strange for me is when I would take the practice exams, like it would take me like 2.5 or 3 hours, and I knew I'd have 4 hours for the exam, so I knew I had a good buffer. But when I was there for exam day, I honestly took most of the exams in an hour and a half, or between an hour and a half. I think FAR took me maybe even a little longer than that, but reg, audit, BEC, like I was between an hour and a half for those. And that's a little bit fast, and I probably should have stuck around a little bit more, but I just went through all the questions as quickly as possible. If I didn't know it, left it open, and then went back through and focused on those hard ones. But you either know it or you don't at some point, and when you don't, you want to try and make an educated guess, but I didn't like to mess around with that too much, and I like to make sure I was getting through the content quickly. I do think that hurt me a little bit on the audit section, because like I said, that was the one I failed. Maybe I was going a little bit too quick. I mean, if it's a 4-hour exam, it takes you an hour and a half. I mean, buddy, come on. Slow it down. Okay, study hours. I get this question all the time. And this really varies based on your personal and life situation, but you need to get creative because, like I said, it's better to try and pass this thing in 6 to 7 months and be done with it than it is to let this sucker drag out for 2 or 3 years, lapsing sections, make this like the misery of your 20s. No, that's not how it has to be. This can be a quick thing that's done in just a few months and you move on and you start your career. But when I didn't have master's classes, like I said, remember, I worked 40 hours a week. Nights where I did not have a master's class, I would study from 6 to 10 p.m. And when I did have night class, I would study from 9 to 11 p.m., so a little bit less hours. But I would also kind of sit in the back and like go through multiple choice while I was in the class. Because I, was a master's student at this point. It was the same university I went to undergrad. I kind of knew how things went. It wasn't super hard, so I was able to do that. And then weekends, I would study from about 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And, I did that almost every weekend during this whole process. And like I said, I studied about a month per section. If you have kids, like you need to get creative, right? If you have a family, you need to get creative. Like on the weekends, try to get up early. If your kids get up at 7, try to get up at 5. You could sneak in 2 hours. And then when they go to bed, you could sneak in another 2 hours. And during the day, you could tell your family, hey guys, I need to do some studying for about 2 hours. And that's about 6 hours. And yeah, that is tough. And like, it's going to make you a little bit tired, but you need to get a little bit creative. When you have a job, right, like I did, if you can't squeeze it in at night, like from the 6 to 10 p.m. or 9 to 11 p.m. like I did, try to get into work an hour or two early. Try to study during lunch. Like that, I would do that to make it work. And sometimes employers can be very accommodating, especially if your CPA is part of your purpose for working there and let you study while you're working. But like I said, I did this while working 40 hours, master's classes, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and we did not break up because of the CPA exam. So it is definitely doable given all of the hurdles. But you have to get creative and you have to be committed. And again, like I just see people spend so many more months than they have to, and they end up failing just as often as the people that bust it and go crazy like I did. So the exam date, I have mixed feelings about this and it changes constantly, whether or not you should set it in advance or wait until the last minute. And I'm really fine with either. The one thing you need to look at is in your city and state, look on the Prometric site. That's where you schedule your exams, prometric.com. And when you go through the whole application process, you'll figure this out. Some cities have like so many open slots. Like you could just any day you could find a day to take the exam. Other cities, it's not as plentiful. And so if it is plentiful and there's a lot of openings and you want to wait to the last minute, because you're like, okay, maybe I'll need a couple extra days. Maybe I'll need an extra week. Okay, you know what? Go for it. Or if you know that there are not very many open seats, make sure you schedule that 2 to 3 weeks in advance, and you have to just work around it and make sure you meet your study goals. And for me, 8 a.m. on Mondays worked best because I knew after the weekend I had time to study. I could go ahead and take that and then go into work for a half a day and go for the rest of the week and go to night class and everything. But on Monday morning at 8 a.m., like that was when I had the most free time to study. And I'm not an advocate of like going insane the 2 days before. I think I'll talk about that in a second. But 8 a.m. Mondays work best for me. If you're not a morning person, you have to do nights or afternoons, go for it. There's really no barometer that I've seen that works for everybody in the exam date and the exam time area. It's really based on your personality preferences and ability to wake up early and scheduling other things. And like I said before, I do want to talk a little bit about this, even though I did an entirely other webinar on this, but this is the ideal dates to take the exam, in my opinion. You start January 1st, and you can just apply this to any windows where there's 2 months where you take the exam, 1 month of blackout. I'm just using the first 3 months as an example, but you can apply this to any other window. The first day in January, boom, you take the exam. The first day of February, boom, you take the exam. And for each of those, you studied a month. And then you have a whole month to take it at the end of February. And then you have the blackout month, and you get your scores from the first 3 exams. And then April 1st, you take that last exam. And you're probably going to fail one of these. You're probably going to fail something from January, February, and that's fine. You can retake that the 2nd or 3rd week of April. And if you fail 2, that's fine. You can retake all of those in April, and then you'll have 1, 2, or 3 more exams completed in April, and then you'll just have to wait for your scores to come out. And that's exactly how I'd plan it. And that's how I originally tried to plan it. But like I said, my NTS came out a little bit late. So if I were thinking of doing this, I would honestly be submitting my NTS in late October. at the latest, honestly. And then I would try to take the exams during this time period. So this is really the structure I would try and use if you're trying to get it done fast. And like I said, it took me 7 months and I failed once, but that's because I had a plan to do it as quickly as possible. If I had a plan to pass in 7 months, it probably would have taken me 10 or 11 because, for lack of a better saying, shit happens. It just does, and you can't factor in all of the nightmares, especially when you've never done it. I'm telling you a lot of these tips and tricks on this webinar, but the way life is that the one thing that Andrew Argue, that bean counter guy, didn't talk about on this webinar is the one thing that's going to happen to you. And you thought you could go for a year or 18 months, but that one thing happened to you, and then boom, all of a sudden you're losing sections. So on the actual exam day, when you're in there taking the exam, if you don't know one of the questions, I like to just go with my gut and move on. And I had, when I was there, you actually have a piece of paper. Now I believe you have like a little board with like a little marker, and I'm honestly not even sure what it looks like because I haven't been in there. But either way, you have something to write with. And when I was going through and I knew I didn't know a question, I would guess on it and I'd be like, okay, I want to come back and look at this one. And I'd complete 30 questions, which is how many you can complete at a time, and they call them testlets before you move on to the next testlet, but 30 questions, I believe. And then you would go back and look at those. And for me, it would be probably 5 or 8 questions. Now remember, some of these questions they throw out. If you didn't know that, it's not like every single question that you take on the exam is counted in your final score. Some of them are test questions, and they're trying to figure out what questions will work for future exams, and so they're throwaway. So those 5 to 8 I was looking at could have been all throwaway, and like I got 100 on the rest. And for some of the exams, I'm sure that was the case. But you can't stress out on these questions. And the way that you get around that is you say, look, I'm allowed to fail. I've been planning failure into my plan. So if I fail this exam, great. And then on top of that, these could be throwaway questions. So I'm not going to stress myself out and spend 3 hours on these 5 or 8 questions in this testlet that I can't figure out, because these could be throwaways anyway. So I'm going to do the best I can. If I don't know it, I don't know it. I'm going to make an educated guess. But there's really no reason to stew and stress yourself out on a couple questions just because you don't know them right out the gate. And like I said before, you could take the whole time for the exam, and I would encourage you to do that if that works for you. Go slow, take your time. But for me, it honestly took me about 100 minutes per section. I was out of there quick. You get 4 hours, but I was taking about an hour and a half. And I failed one section. If I would have stuck around a little bit longer, okay, maybe. But I just like to get through them quick. And I feel like if I know it, I know it. If I don't, I don't. Again, this is another area where I don't think that what I did was the best way, and everybody needs to do it. Know yourself. If you need to take a little bit more time, if you're a slower reader, if you want to go back and spend that extra time, do. But I guess my point here also is that the time they give you is plenty of time. Like, you shouldn't be anywhere near that if you aren't stewing on a couple of points that you just need to move on from. And one big thing I've seen with people is, cramming the night before, and that's really a waste. It's kind of like to be honest, auditing. You'd be working on this audit engagement, and it would be an 8-month-long engagement, and then everybody is working till 2 or 3 in the morning the night before. And I'm like, guys, look, if you weren't done at 10 p.m. the night before after 8 months, is it really going to be done at 2:30 in the morning? I don't think so. I think you're just going to have to miss certain things because you didn't plan it out well enough and you didn't get it done in time. Sorry, Charlie, that's just the way it happened. And for the exam, it's the same thing. Look, if you've been studying for a month and it's the night before and you're cramming, that's not going to help. And one of the biggest things people don't do is go into these exams with a clear mind. The night before, actually the whole day before, I would focus more on relaxing. Do a practice exam if you want. That might take you 2.5 hours or so. Do some multiple choice in some of the areas that you're better at, because that'll build your confidence. You're getting a lot of questions right. You're used to looking at the screen, clicking it. Yeah, green check, green check, green check, green check. You're doing good. Build that confidence. And on that day before, I wouldn't put in any more than 40% effort and 40% time of what you normally do, because I need you to be relaxed. I need you to have a clean head. I need you to go out to dinner and enjoy yourself. Not too much drinking. We don't want a headache in there the next day. But then I want you to get some good sleep. And you are going to be nervous, and that comes with it. You're going to have to work to get to sleep, especially on that first exam. But I don't want you to kill yourself the day before and go in all stressed out. That is not good for anyone. And most of the reason I think people fail so many sections in a row is because of bad planning and stressing themselves out, getting pressure on themselves, other people putting pressure on them. It's tough. And some other general study tips is that, live classes are really a waste of time and money. I don't think you should go to them. Look, all the CPA review courses have digital content, stuff that you can download from the internet or, upload into your computer or whatever. And they have the instructors on there. And these are the best instructors out there. Roger from Roger CPA Review, he's an incredible lecturer, right? If you go to live classes of any CPA review firm, you're just going to get the local guy, right? These are not the best. These are not the cream of the crop. These are not the top professors that have the best metaphors, know this content because they do this every single year and they've been doing this for 20 years. You don't want to do live classes. If you're going to listen to lectures, listen to the people in the computer because they are the best at what they do and they built big businesses out of doing this. So you want to listen to them. You don't want to listen to the local person that is interested in teaching, review courses on the weekends. No. And like I said before, most people fail because of too much family, friend, and peer pressure. You got to cut that all out. This goes back to what I said before about going into a dark hole and disappearing. People don't need to know the day you're taking the exam. People don't need to know the day the score comes out. You don't need to, make sure that you're alerting all your friends because when you fail, going through the experience of failure is bad enough. Then have everybody else, reminding you that Rebecca's passing and you're failing. Oh, come on. Do I really need that right now? I mean, geez. So that's the last thing you need is everybody around you putting pressure on you. Now, you might have great family, great friends, and there may not be any of that peer pressure, in which case, go for it, knock yourself out. But let's just be honest, you're the minority. Most people get a lot of pressure from those around them. Eliminate noise, get away, study your ass off. That's really what you have to do, and do it as quickly as possible because you're going to fail. Just look down right now, think about yourself, and say, Rebecca, you're going to fail. Because most people do. So might as well fail fast and move on. And remember, this test does not define you. I like you, even though, I get a lot of your questions. I appreciate that. You guys are great. Your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mom, your dad, your boss, your classmates, they still like you. This has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to be a successful accountant, nothing to do with whether or not you're going to make a ton of money, have a very successful career. So just get it done, get it out of the way, and think of it as a hazing exercise that you just have to do to make a little bit more money, or, well, actually a lot more money. Quote that I love and I share on the bean counter quite a bit is KYFHD, and I heard this from a guy named Michael Creamer. If you guys have ever been to an Apple retail store, I believe that is the most successful retail store when you're talking about profit per square footage of the store in the history of the human race. It's just a very successful business. Everybody kind of knows that. But this guy was the founding CFO for Apple retail stores. So when they launched the first store and then they started rolling them out all over the country, this was the CFO at the time. And I was listening to a speech from him at the Institute of Management Accountants Conference, and he threw this quote up on the board that was, "Keep your effing head down." And what he was getting at was that, look, there are times to speak and to be like the person that everybody looks up to and wants their advice and gets on the podium and delivers something. There are times of life where you get to do that. And there's other times of life where you just need to shut up and get it done. And the CPA exam is exactly like that. Look, I passed the exam years ago. I've spent time in public accounting. I've been doing the bean counter for years, and I come out here and I give this webinar and I get to speak, and that's really great. But when I was doing the CPA exam and I failed audit, nobody cared what I thought. Nobody cared what my opinion was about how you should study or what you should do or everything like that. And rightfully so, because I was somebody who needed to get it done. And once you get it done, then you can help other people pass. You can help give them advice. You can help them set up a study schedule. You can help them pick a review course. But until you've met that goal of passing, it's time for you to be quiet. Don't need to go out with friends. No more restaurants. No more drinking. No more clubs. No more vacations. You need to get this exam completed, and you need to keep your head down. Okay, so we're going to answer some questions, but before we do that, if you go to thebeancounter.com, the very first post over there is how to pass the CPA exam in 7 months and fail at least once. It's kind of the notes from this webinar, and that's also where I'm going to be posting the recording to this webinar. So go to thebeancounter.com, it's the very first post right at the top. Leave a comment there. And anybody that leaves a comment there you'll be the first ones entered into my Roger CPA review course, full course. They just launched a full new course. It's really awesome stuff. You'll be entered into a giveaway for that we're going to be giving away in July. So we're going to be giving that away. If you go over there and comment, you leave your question. If you left it here in the chat, you can go and put it over there. I might answer it if we left it here in the chat. But go over there. You'll be entered into a product review or a giveaway for Roger CPA review course, how to pass a CPA exam in 7 months and fail at least once. You'll get the webinar there too. You can share that with friends. You can come back to it if you're like, oh, everybody always emails me after these things like, oh, where can I get the recording? This is where I'll put the recording. There's some notes there, and you'll also be entered into a full Roger CPA review course giveaway. So take a couple seconds and do that while we start to get into the questions.
Is that my cue?
It is, yes, Jeff. If you want to, because I don't think I can see the questions on my end. So if you have a couple of them we can get to, that would be great.
I'll get to a few of them now. Really important point, though, Andrew, is why are you picking on Rebecca, man? What'd she do to you?
I actually like, all the Rebeccas I've ever known are great. So if you're a Rebecca in the audience, you're probably phenomenal. But, you got to choose a name. I guess somebody's got to have a name. Next time I'll just go with Andrew and beat up on myselher.
Just kidding. You know what? There isn't a Rebecca in the audience. I'm surprised by that. Her feelings aren't hurt. That's important. Okay.
True.
So a lot of questions, and guys, if we don't get to your question, no worries. You can just follow the link that Andrew gave. Give the comment. Your question is your comment, and he'll be standing by to answer. Do I have that right, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. I will answer any question on that page. So if you put a question there, you'll be entered in the giveaway, and I'll be answering every single one on that page. So if we don't get to it here, I will answer every single question over there.
So first question, you made a claim earlier that studying in a group doesn't help to pass a CPA exam, and had a couple people say, why do you say that? What's your rationale for that, Andrew?
Look, the thing is that I like friends. Friends are great, and I had a good friend in college that we would get together for some of our exams, and we would study some of the key points beforehand for like intermediate accounting. But when you're studying the CPA exam, you need to spend every single moment you can focused on the content. And when you look at the screen and you look at the content and the videos and the lectures and the multiple choice, and it's that and you, that is really the best environment for doing it. And when you have other friends, I just see so much fraternizing. I see so much small talk. Someone's got some life problem that needs to get into. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. But look, this thing can really drag out for a long time. And so that's the first piece. The first piece is there's a lot of distractions. And I would rather you put that time 100% into you and the material rather than bringing in those other distractions. The second reason is that when you study in groups, that's where a lot of this mental peer pressure comes in. And look, some of you might think you're above that, and that's great. I'll tell you right now, I'm not above it. And when you're trying to do something new and you're failing at it, it beats you up. It beats me up. I'm going to say that right now. It beats me up. So you don't need to feel bad if it beats you up. And if you say it doesn't beat you up at all, well, that would be surprising to me. I'm sure for some of you it may be possible. But these other people know when you're taking the exam because you're probably studying the same section. You're probably taking it together. And once you take the first section, the second section, and you fail and they pass, it starts to crush you. And I really like to clear out the mental stuff. And I like people to do it on their own. No one's going to be able to go in there and help you day of. It's going to be just you and a computer screen. And making yourself get used to that content with just you and a computer screen is the best way to set you up for the day of, is just you and a computer screen. There's no friends allowed in the exam. So, those are really the three reasons, I would say. You need to get used to that content, not waste any time. You don't want to experience that peer pressure, and you need to try and replicate what it's going to be like the day of.
That's an awesome answer, and it's just you and the test, and you got to get used to handling it by yourself. Great, phenomenal answer. Studying at night studying night after work is very difficult to concentrate. How are you able to focus? Did you take vitamins or pills in order to focus? How did you make it work?
One of the things I did was, I really am an advocate of studying in public places because, if you're studying in your office at your house or in a private room in your house or something like that, it's really easy to start, and I'm, it's going to be a little graphic here, start picking your toenails, start sucking on your thumbs, whatever people do when they're alone. But if you're sitting at a Starbucks or you're sitting at a Panera, you really can't, it's harder to get distracted. It's harder to, you can go and get some food, you go and get a cup of coffee, maybe if you need to take a breather outside, that's great, but the kitchen's not right there. You're also not completely alone and able to do sort of weird physical things like weird stretches and stuff like you're in public, so you need to act a certain way. And so I would say if you're having trouble studying at night, the first thing I would do would be get to a well-lit coffee shop or a place like Panera. That's what I did. And, I like coffee mainly because of the heat, not so much because of the caffeine. A lot of times I'll drink decaf. But, if you can get a cup of coffee, do that as well. That would be my biggest thing. But I think a lot of people have trouble studying at night when they come home and everything, and there's all the distractions of TV. Maybe you have a significant other, you've got the kitchen. I like the idea of being out somewhere with all these other people that are awake, alive, and alert. There's good lighting, there's noises going on, and you can't sort of drift into picking your toenails, if that makes sense. Jeff, are you there?
Sorry, Andrew, talking on mute. I was
No
giving
worries.
pearls of wisdom too. So did you study at night after work, or were you studying during the workday in public? Like, what was a good time for you?
Oh, I was studying mainly at night. I would study during the day on the weekends because I was working 40 hours during the week, normal business hours, 9 to 5, at a company working in the accounting department. And so after work, if I, like I said earlier, if I did not have master's classes at night, I would go straight to Starbucks or Panera and I would study from about 6 to 10. If I did have master's classes, then I would go from like 9 to 11. But on the weekends, I would go all day to a Starbucks, a well-lit Starbucks, and I'd study from 9 or 10 a.m. to about 8 p.m. at night.
Nice.
And that was nice because on the weekends, if you finish at about 8 p.m., then that gives you a couple hours afterwards. Yeah, 8 p.m. sounds a little late, but that's a couple hours to go spend time with friends or significant others, and still actually enjoy your life while still getting in a lot of study.
A lot of people I've talked to have also taken that model of just compressing it into the weekends and, hey, look, for the next year, I'm going to be giving up my weekends, but I'll be done, and in your case, 7 months. Okay, so some more questions, Andrew. Are CPA exam private tutors available, to your knowledge, and would you suggest them?
That's a great question. I've heard a lot of people bring that up recently, and, again, I guess I'm not completely against the idea, but I do really like the idea of one-on-one, you and the computer having to solve the problems. There are a number of companies that do offer services like that. Some companies offer live classes where you can get somebody, like Roger CPA Review, for example. They have a group of CPAs where you can ask questions about the course content and material if you're struggling with a certain area. So you'll reach out and you'll say, hey, I couldn't really figure out this whole thing on leases. Can somebody clarify this for me? And then you'll get an actual human to read your email, respond to you, and you can go through that process quite a bit. So that is sort of a kind of private tutor. And then obviously, yes, there are other people out there that do private tutoring. I don't know of big companies where they're like, hey, we're just private tutors for the CPA exam. But if you know somebody that passed and did well, feel free to ask them too. You'll probably get the best deal that way in terms of paying a cheap price for just somebody that passed it really well. But again, going back to it, if I were in your shoes, I would get used to you and the computer because come game time, that's all there's going to be.
So would you read the chapters several times before answering homework questions or taking the review exams?
What I liked to do was watch the lectures, answer the questions. No, sorry. Watch the lectures and read the book at the same time. So that's how most of the review course providers set up the courses. Mm-hmm. And then once I did, a 20 or 30 or 40-minute section, I would then take all the multiple choice for that section. And then I would go on and listen to the lectures, read the book, and then take the multiple choice for that section. And that's how I did it for everything all the way through. And like I said before, if you don't want to listen to lectures and read the book, I do think for some people it's sufficient to just do the multiple choice, especially for areas where you might have a lot of experience. Like if you've already taken your audit course and you've been an auditor for a while, you might be able to get away with just the multiple choice questions. But for me, I didn't want to take a chance. I said, you know what? I'm going to spend time getting through all the material in this course, and we're gonna go from there.
Um, okay, great answer. We've got probably time for like 2 or 3 more, and then there's another 15. Andrew, before we ask the questions, give them the instructions one more time on where to go next, so that we can continue the conversation when we drop
Yep.
the call here in a few minutes.
Go to thebeancounter.com, the very first post at the top, how to pass the CPA exam in 7 months and fail at least once. Comment on that post. You'll be entered in for a Roger CPA review course, full review course giveaway, which we're going to be giving away in July. And I'll also answer all questions there. So any question that gets posted there, I will answer it, and so you'll be able to get an answer there as well. And if I don't have an answer, or if your answer requires a resource, like a specific question about states or something, I can point you in a direction. I'll share a link with you to help you out as well. So yeah, go ahead and thebeancounter.com, the top post on the homepage there.
This is a really interesting question that I want to bring up. Okay, I'm gonna read it, and then I'll maybe try to summarize it at the end there. Looks like Andrew passed because he already had working experience. What about those who just got off school with no working experience? I think there is no way I could pass the exam in 7 months. So I think this lecture is just for experienced people. I disagree with that, but what do you think about this? Yeah.
Great comment, and I would totally disagree with that, and let me tell you why. You know, when you go through school and you take all your classes, that is not going to help you pass the exam. You know, there may be some anecdotal things, okay, you know, you learned about leases, and so that'll help you with the lease questions, but school does not prepare you for the exam. Working in accounting does not prepare you for the exam. The work I was doing had, especially like working, the full-time work I was doing in accounting, it was so low level. I was basically an intern, you know, working on like organization, admin, and basic accounting stuff, like, and nothing that was all the high level stuff you need to know for the exam. And in fact, I would tell you this, what you learned in school and what you learned while working can be counterproductive for you when taking the exam. Because you'll experience things in the real world and you'll think, oh, I have real world experience. That will help me answer the CPA exam question. Wrong. What will help you answer the CPA exam question is what is in the CPA review course. Because these questions are asked and the answers are very specific. And there's a lot of real world exceptions to a lot of these things. And you may have that in your life. So if you're a student coming out and you don't have any work experience, I'd argue you might have a better chance at passing the exam because you don't have all that clutter of your real world experience that's influencing how you're answering these questions. You'll have, yeah, your education, which will clutter it a little bit, but most of what you'll have is just you and that review course. So yeah, I really think that doesn't play into it at all. In fact, it may hurt.
I like it, man. I'm going to keep rolling. Do you know how often they change the content inside the exams?
Yeah, every 3 months. You know, every testing window it changes, and I'm not even sure that, you know. So in every state, the exams are the same. So if you take the exam in Florida, like it's going to be substantially the same as the exam in, Rhode Island. Like it's going to be substantially the same questions and everything for that 2-month period that the exams are out. But then the next 2-month period, like it's all different. And I don't even know that, you know, every time, if you're in Florida, somebody goes in on a Tuesday and takes the exam, and they go in on a Wednesday and they take the exam, I don't think the questions are in the exact same order, and I'm not even sure that it's like the exact same exam, like every for every single person. I think they do change things up a little bit. You know, like for example, all those test questions I was telling you about, they send different test questions out to different people, but they are constantly changing the exam throughout the year, 3 or 4 times. They're really changing it a lot. And then every couple of years, they do a full-on like overhaul of how they do the CPA exam, like completely. Like probably I would say every 5 years, somewhere in that time period, where they're like, okay, we're totally changing the way we do simulations. We're totally changing the way we do writing. We're totally changing the way we do these multiple choice questions. And you know, they're going to be doing that again in the next few years. They've done that a number of times. I mean, the exam used to be all 4 sections you had to take on the same day. Now it's you could take one part at a time. And so they're changing it all the time. And they're always trying to see, okay, people that pass the exam, how good are they performing? What are the problems we're hearing out in the profession? And incorporating things into the exam to try and help with that. So they're constantly changing it. But one thing to put in here is that your review course generally will be updated once a year. And then when you get a review course like Roger CPA Review, they will release throughout the year supplemental materials. So you'll buy a review course for the year 2015. And right now it's June. And so the AI CPA has released some additional information about what's on the exam this year. And so Roger CPA Review will send you an email, or it'll be included in your course. Hey, here's a couple of extra PDFs to read through because they're also telling us that this stuff could be on the exam. So that's another good reason for getting with the review course. They'll keep you up to date on the very cutting edge.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you the last question. Before I do, there's two follow-up items. One, if like Andrew said, head to thebeancounter.com to continue the conversation, especially if your question wasn't answered. I'm sorry if we couldn't get to it. Guys, don't forget to, when you're done with that, taking 2 minutes to build a profile on accountingfly.com, get recruited, get informed. We'll invite you to more information and more webinars like this. We send out job opportunities. We send out a lot of interesting stuff that you probably would be interested in, and certainly you can get recruited by recruiters who are searching our resume database of accountants and accounting students. All right. So last question, Andrew, then we're going to wrap. And I've gotten this question 4 times. Is there an order to take the exam sections in that seems to be like the most strategic order?
Yeah. So the predominant, like the way that most people answer this question is to take FAR first, because it is the biggest section. It is like if you look at the textbooks for the exams, like FAR is definitely thicker. There's a lot to get through there. And I did not do that. However, I don't think that that's bad advice. Especially if when you're on the shorter game plan, like I'm advocating, the order is not super important because you're going to have time to take extra sections. I actually like the idea of taking sections that you think you can pass first, because I like the idea of getting a confidence booster. Just to give you a personal example, when we were paying off our student loans, my wife and I, we had a bunch of student loans, and do you focus on the one with the highest interest rate, or do you focus on the one that's the biggest? Well, we liked to focus on the ones that were the smallest, because we could pay off $2,500 or $5,000 student loan, and then it's like, boom, we had 5 loans, now we only have 4 loans, and then the next one, boom, we had 4 loans, now we only have 3 loans. And so I kind of like the idea of taking the same approach with the CPA exam. If you feel like you really enjoyed auditing, you feel like you've got a good handle on that content, take auditing first, pass it, confidence booster, you're really excited. Then like BEC is short, you kind of really enjoyed some of your general business classes, you think you're going to be good at that, take that one next. And I like that's the way I handled it, and I sort of organized it in that fashion. But if you're the kind of person that wants to knock out the beast right out of the gates, then do FAR. I don't think it matters one way or the other. A lot of people recommend you take FAR first because they're worried about timing. They're like, oh, you need to get FAR out of the way so you don't worry about that 18 months. If you just worry about passing this thing in 4 to 6 months, the 18-month thing should never factor into anything at all, because you're passing it so quickly. So to me, the ordering is not super important. However, what I would recommend is that you go with the ones you know you can pass first to build up that confidence.
I love it. Okay, that's phenomenal. We're here right at the end. Let's go ahead and keep the party going over on thebeancounter.com. But for those of you who aren't sticking around, I want to say thank you for giving us an hour. Judging by the comments that I've gotten, it's been well worth your time. I believe it has too. Take 2 seconds and answer a quick 3-question survey if you don't mind. As you're closing out, it'll help us give more information. Hey, Andrew, it's always a pleasure. It's always awesome when you are on these. You do such a great job. Thanks for bringing such insight and great work as always.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Jeff, for having me on. And if anybody has any questions, you can always email me at andrew@thebeancounter.com. I will answer all those questions over there, but you can always email me as well with CPA exam related or other questions. Thank you guys so much for coming in, and have a great rest of your day and the upcoming weekend.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Bye, everybody.